Welcome to the Dennis Report. I'm Dennis Atchison. What is the role that a theater plays in a community? Is it more than just the bricks and mortar of what makes a Playhouse or an Imperial Theater or a Capitol Theater? Or is it something that it brings to the community that's way on the intangible scale? Something more about the community's liveliness, its voice, its creativity, and makes a community a wonderful place to live. Today's guest is going to walk us in depth and with much passion about the role of a theater in a community. Tim Yerxa is the Executive Director of the Playhouse in Fredericton, New Brunswick. While that sounds like a good official title, he does a lot more than that because he's got the place just rocking. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And away we go with explorations. Maybe you could get into a bit for the bigger audience, that maybe St. John, Fredericton, or up north that don't quite know about the Playhouse.
Sure.
Because you've got lots happening in it. And so can you do a 2-minute encapsulation of...
Yeah, of what we do today? Yeah. So we're located right in the heart of downtown Fredericton. We're an organization and a building that's dedicated to the performing arts. So we're really like Fredericton's premier performance venue. We're like the municipal sort of performance venue. And in a city the size of Fredericton, we play a few really important roles. One is when professional music, dance, theater artists are touring, we provide a venue for them in Fredericton for the people in this region. But we're also the place where, kids have their dance recitals at the end of the year. The local high school does its annual production. So we're both a venue for professional performance, work that's touring or work that's even created here in New Brunswick and performing in Fredericton. But we're also like the community's theater. And that's the role that we play. The building that we work out of is more than 50 years old. I'm sure we'll get into the building and the state of the building. But it has a long history of kind of both of those functions in the community. And in that way, really what we do is we bring the community together, giving great content to community life.
Interesting too that it's not a hockey rink, it's not a basketball court, it's not a curling rink, but it's a place where people gather and some pretty exciting things happen.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about live performance, in this world you can be entertained in any number of channels. The thing about live performance that has always remained and always will remain is that when you share an experience with other people, that's special. And I mean, if you share a meal with your family at home, that's special. But when you share an experience with the community and you're all in the same room at the same time, having the same experience, there's something inherently magical and quite human about that experience. And so, when big world events happen, people say that everyone remembers where they were when, man landed on the moon or when JFK was shot or what have you. It's kind of that same thing about everyone remembers being together and sharing an experience together. And that to me that's community building, bringing people together and giving them a shared experience. In that way, it's not unlike a sporting event, It's in fact the same kind of thing about the community coming together to share in something special. And we happen to use, in that respect, we use live performance or the performing arts as being the reason why people are coming together to have some sort of an extraordinary experience.
In that spirit of extraordinary experience, not that long ago, Count Basie Band was in town. And that was a moment that you could tell in that audience when that was going on, that something extra or transcendent was happening. Just the pleasure of having that band play a smaller venue, and then what the audience was doing with it and how they were reacting. So
yeah, for sure, that was special.
It really adds some juice to the town, and that's so important. But sometimes some people will categorize it, it's like theater, it's over there. And you've bridged something, you've done something the past 10 or some odd years where that place really hops now. Do you have any sense of how many people will come through there, not just as patrons, but also the use of it as that, learning center and experiential center from summer theater, musical theater.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
The workshops that you put on attached to shows, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. So, first and foremost, we are a facility and services that allow others to stage performances. Like 75% or so of everything that happens at the Playhouse, there's a third organization. There's not just the artist and us, but there's this other organization who's either the promoter or the presenter or the producer of a show, and that could be, a local nonprofit organization that's dedicated to professional performing arts. Could be a local school. Could be a for-profit promoter, that's working in the commercial side of the business. But primarily, we're there to provide an infrastructure, to provide the services that go along with that, technical services and marketing and all those things in order to make something happen. But the remaining 25% of all the things that we do is our own programs. And so our own programs, we run 6 different programs and they all have different purposes. But that's essentially where we sort of take the role of not just the venue, but also that promoting organization as well, where we're actually go out and hire artists like the Count Basie Orchestra, invite them to Fredericton to perform, and then we deliver the audience, go out and get the audience and deliver that. So our flagship program is called the Spotlight Series. It's about 30 engagements per year with professional touring artists from across Canada and around the world in all disciplines and genres. So music, theater, dance, traditional, contemporary, classical. And then we use that as a jumping off point for some of our other programs. So for example, we have a program called Experience More, which is all about learning. It's all about enrichment. So we have this artist in town, or we have this event happening. What else can we do for the community, and especially those coming to the performance, to give them some sort of a deeper engagement with what's going on? So it could be that the artist is skilled at delivering some kind of education program, or it could be a lecture, or it could be a post-show talk with the artist, or it could be something where we delve into the content of what's happening. But it's really about that enrichment part. And so we have, as I said, the flagship program is the Spotlight Series. We have Experience More. We also have a program where we deliver matinee performances for school children, which is really expanding right now. It's one of our fastest growing programs, where school children in the region take a field trip to come to a professional theater to see a professional artist perform in a professional environment. And I would say for the majority of the kids who come to those shows, if we didn't deliver that program through the school, they would never set foot in the theater.
Yep.
For a number of reasons. Could be, socioeconomic reasons. It could be that their parents, it's not on their radar. It's not something they would normally think to do with their children. They have other interests. So it really is about providing accessibility to young people at a very impressionable age about what live performance and what the idea of sharing that experience is all about, and how that can contribute to their life. So those are kind of 3 of the programs. We also have a really important program called Arts Are For Everyone, which is really about access to the performing arts, and making sure that people in our community who have barriers to participating are able to participate. That 25% of the activity level, we spend a lot of energy and resources on, and the community does as well. Really, we all come together to do it. And our goal there is to do the things that wouldn't otherwise be happening in the other 75%, and to sort of push and stretch and deepen people's experiences.
That's amazing. It's so much more than the building or the first blush at looking through the program. It integrates so much. Do you have an anecdote from one of the workshops? Do you have a high point where someone came to a workshop and something exciting or really fun happened, or?
I mean, I could go on and on.
There's a bunch of them, right?
A bunch of them. I would say like some of the most rewarding of those sort of workshop experiences are when young people participate. Because they have so much more capacity to have their mind blown, right? Because their starting point, they have less reason to be jaded about anything, in the world. So they come with a willingness or an openness for learning and experience that adults generally, we've had that suppressed in us over time.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you see young people come, you know, to take a hip hop dance, you know, program or something from a professional, you know, hip hop artist, I mean, they're just, you know, their minds are blown. This is stuff they see on TV. They don't think of it happening in their own communities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that wasn't that long ago, was it?
I mean, we've done,
workshop?
yeah, we did a hip hop workshop this year. We've done them in the past, but either whether it's that or even, you know, in classical ballet or in music or theater or circus arts, you know, we've had kids come and do circus arts, and it's not just for children, but I would say those are the ones that kind of they get you know, they make the hair on the back of your neck stand up when you see kids whose lives are really changed just within a 1 hour experience of doing something completely different.
It's such a long way from technology, from entertainment through technology, where it's video games or Facebook or the rest of that they're actually out there doing it and stretching themselves out.
Yeah, that's important. I think that's important to a lot of folks, parents maybe especially so.
Well, one of the themes that runs through this program in the interview style is the notion of play. And when done about economy or when done about political change. So for example, when Charles Murray, the Ombudsman, was on the show, he talked about how do we get ourselves in a place to allow politicians to change a decision from an election platform. Because 2 years later, they've got new information and that's not a good decision. Mm-hmm. So there's a playfulness that needs to emerge in the whole narrative in the province to allow for a shift to occur, a change to occur. And what you provide through the Playhouse is a place where humans can go to play again and to remember that, because you've differentiated younger people and be more open to it, and the older people need to remember how to get in the sandbox and muck around and take out the dolls and the action figures and the cardboard boxes and build the city again.
They also have to, you know, they also have to be reminded of their own humanity, which is really what the arts does. You know, I mean, if you go to like tomorrow night we're having a recital by Classic Albums Live of a Creedence Clearwater Revival album. Okay, so some people might say, well, where's the art in that? And I mean, aside from the, you know, the virtuosity of the musicians and all that kind of stuff that's going to happen at that concert, there's going to be a whole bunch of people there who will, in a moment, be reminded of what it's like to be a little bit younger. And a time in their life, maybe, what they'll do is they'll connect with a time in their life when they had more possibility in their thinking. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. It's about just giving people just a little bit of a shift, you know, from their everyday life, just like 1 degree to say, oh yeah, I have that in me. Like I have those memories in me, or I can be excited, I can get in the sandbox like I used to, or that's what it feels like again to be like that. Or, you know, exposing some piece of their spirituality, or maybe an intellectual stimulation that just causes them to just think about their world, think about their relationships with their families, with their communities, with New Brunswick, with Canada, or with humanity. Just to think about that relationship in just a slightly different way, and by doing that, we are encouraging people to ask questions. And asking questions, you know, I say this all the time. If there's one thing I want my kids to be good at, it's asking questions of themselves and of the world that they're in. And at the end of the day, that's what art is all about, is to cause people to ask questions. And that's what I think is important in terms of that idea of shifting thinking.
Can open up that my third eye, almost open up the mindset to what could be instead of what is.
Absolutely, yeah.
That, as you speak, I'm reminded of how when people get to analyzing their community or their province, and analyzing in a heartfelt way, not in a clinical specific way for dissecting it into parts, over and over again, one of the themes that always emerges is that the role of arts and culture plays in helping a society know who they are.
That's right.
And you were speaking so strongly to that. Can you see a way that, there's major shifts going on in the world, global shifts, and even provincially. A lot of behaviors aren't tolerated anymore in the banking industry or environmental practices. So we're on the cusp of well, actually we started 10 years ago, the rollover into a new way of doing things. Can you see that the arts or culture can help guide us through that discussion by reminding us who we are, compared to a bank saying, here's the direction we should be going, or an economic analyst? Think it's finally time yet for the poet's voice or the artist's voice to be up there equal with the economist or the politician? It kind of makes sense.
Yeah, you know, I'll tell you, that would not be new, though.
No.
It would not be a new idea to have an
new.
artist's voice. But I would say over the past little while, we may have forgotten. We may have forgotten why the artist's voice is important. I mean, an artist is a special person in society because they have a way of looking at the world that most of us do not have the capacity to look at it. And they are, through their art, able to reflect that perspective back to us in a way that only an artist can. And so that's why artists are so important in society, is that they have this magical ability to see things in ways that most of us don't spend enough time thinking. Like, really, artists are paid to think and to reflect back to us. So the role of arts in terms of giving us direction in how we move forward as a society is important. But what's probably even more important is that artists inform not both where we're going, but how we go about it. And I think both of those things are important. And that goes regardless of I work in the performing arts, but that goes across all disciplines of art, whether it's in literature or visual art or film and media arts or what have you.
Yeah. Does it frustrate you then when the justification sometimes for art is always boiled down to an economic argument?
Oh, that drives me crazy. And I've tried to come up with the perfect way to explain it to someone, but the closest one I've come up with is that you don't build a hospital to employ nurses. Like, you build a hospital to fix sick people, right? And so cultural infrastructure, cultural organizations, cultural programs need to be supported. And when I say supported, I mean privately, publicly, in all the ways that we support these things, has to be supported for the role that they play in our communities and in our society, not for the economic output, not only for the economic output that they create. Now, that being said, a healthy and robust cultural scene or arts sector has a major impact on economy in a deeper way than just people buying tickets and eating out in restaurants and attracting tourists and those kinds of things. And that is that arts and culture make a community interesting. And when your community's interesting, people actually might want to live there. And if people don't want to live in your community because it's boring, because there's like nothing going on, because people don't have interesting ideas, they're not willing to have their viewpoint shifted by that 1%, then who's going to want to move there to work for a company, to set up their business, to locate their business? Or why would a young person want to stay in that community? Why would a family doctor want to locate to that community? And so all of these things have impacts on all of us in so many different aspects of our life. And that's what I think the real role of arts and culture is on economy. It's not the direct output, it's creating the environment, creating a place where people actually want to live and therefore work.
Yep. Great point. It reminds me of Richard Florida when I first discovered him 10, 15 years ago. Book was called The Creative Class, I believe. And he was hired by an IT company out of Pittsburgh. They were losing their 25 to 35-year-olds. They had a great payroll plan. They had a great subsidy program. They had fitness centers, everything you could imagine. And they were losing them after 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So Florida went in, did one of his first studies, followed where they went, and interviewed them, and found that that generation wasn't the same value base as the previous generations, where they were working for the sake of work. They flipped it the other way. They wanted a job that paid them enough money so they could go do the fun stuff that they wanted to do.
Right.
And they wanted to live somewhere that was fun. And a lot of them were moving to Boston. So when he went back to the IT company in Pittsburgh, said, your problem isn't your compensation package. And no, you got to make Pittsburgh a fun place to live. You make the town a fun place to live, they'll stay. Because there's been a shift that's occurred. Like they've watched, the millennials or whatever, have watched parents work, from 35 hours a week to 40 hours a week to 60 hours a week and have no time for them. And I'm not doing that. So you're speaking to what would be one of New Brunswick's solutions on its retention issue with people.
I mean, one of the solutions is don't be boring. Like, don't be boring. I mean, fun is one aspect of it. I mean, you just don't, like, it can't, if we're an uninteresting, boring place, no one will want to spend their life here. So to me, it just makes sense. And Pittsburgh, by the way, has gone through a major cultural revolution. I mean, that place is very, very interesting what's going on in the art scene there. And it was, I think partly people like Richard Florida and others in that city who really latched on to the fact that, we have to have interesting things happening here in order for people to want to stay here and work and run their businesses.
Yeah, make it a fun place to live. So, Fredericton's not very big, 55, maybe 65,000 if you include the outlying area. New Brunswick's not very big. You work with the other theaters to bring acts.
Yeah, we have
because you've got a scale issue, so you can book so much based on guaranteed gate to a certain degree or guaranteed audience. Do you see some things that we could be doing better that would make New Brunswick a juicy place to live or Fredericton a juicy place to live? I know your mandate's only within a certain range, but you intersect with so many other things. Would it be, Moncton's made a shift. They've found a way to close their downtown frequently and always have things going on there, and it draws people. St. John used to have their festival
and they've got a new one. They've got a new one just starting up, Festival 506, I think it's called. So
okay.
Yeah, it's and I think there will always be people who want to dig in at the grassroots level and make interesting things happen in their communities. So it's not about coming up with new ideas. There's lots of new ideas, and there will always be, I hope, there will always be people who want to do something neat in their communities. What we have to do is, as communities, to embrace them and help make it happen, pave the road, so to speak. And so that means supporting them with money. Okay, sure. Financial support is one thing, but even just policy decisions, the way a community embraces those kinds of things. And even in hard infrastructure, do you have literally the right physical facilities in order to accommodate, and not just accommodate, to actually encourage that kind of thing to happen in our communities. So, and that's everything from does a community have enough, barriers for an outdoor concert or whatever, through to do you have an adequate performing arts center or an adequate place for you to screen art films in your downtown, or whatever whatever it is. So it's infrastructure, it's policy, it's decision making, and it's financial support, and really nurturing, because the seeds are there. People are creative.
Yes.
It's in them, but we can't make it. We should not make it difficult, onerous, or really hard for them to be able to realize the projects that they want to do in our communities that will actually make them neat and interesting.
And as you say that, I'm playing with different scale, because some people watching might think that it's, it always has to be this big, like a Festival by the Sea or a Harvest Jazz Blues or something. Do you picture different scales? You're not talking about a whole lot of infrastructure. It's just enough to let those artists or community activist types have a place to go make that happen.
Yeah, there's a spectrum, okay? There's a spectrum. So, let's take the theater scene, for example. So in Fredericton, I would say almost every week of the year, there's some independent theater company trying to make something, in the community. And they're mostly not being performed at the Playhouse, at the 700-seat soft seat theater. There's really interesting stuff happening in the student world, on campus. in the downtowns. People are doing really neat things in restaurants and in clubs and in non-traditional spaces and so on and so forth. So, and some, as I said, there's a spectrum. There's like the very experimental, like I have something really important to say about the world and this is how I'm going to say it, to the, I need a night out to be reminded to connect with that humanity thing like we were talking about earlier, to remind myself that I can have fun.
Yeah.
And so it's all of those things, and there is a huge difference in scale in terms of the way communities can encourage creative activities to happen in their communities. It's essential, though.
Does it need, besides the Playhouse, does it need a public place, outdoor public place?
Well,
Whether it's Officer Square for Fredericton's case, or they use Market Square in St. John, and Moncton they use down in front of the Bosses, or
I think public gathering spaces, and I'm not a city planner, but I know, that every great community has a place where their community comes together, and those kind of public places. And I mean, there's more than a couple in Fredericton. What we actually lack in Fredericton is a winterized version of Officer Square, which we hope to address in the future. But that kind of, we'll call it like the community living room. Like the community, every community needs those kind of public places where not only arts activities, but civic activities and other creative pursuits can be undertaken in the heart of their community, in their downtowns and so on.
Yeah, it creates that sense of space and place, and they know when they gather there, something will happen. It'll be like a pulse for the town, pulse place.
Absolutely.
This would be a good place for us to pause for a bit. When we come back after a couple of minutes, we'll pick up the conversation with Tim Yerxa. Thanks. Welcome back. Our guest today is Tim Yerxa, Executive Director of the Playhouse in Fredericton. And we've been exploring the role and impact that theater and a community facility like a Playhouse or an Imperial Theater or a Capitol Theater in Moncton has in its role in a community, and how much excitement and fun it builds in a community. But Tim, that building that you're in now needs to change. Something needs to shift. It's been a great home for 50 plus years.
Yeah, 50, almost 52 years. Yeah. The Playhouse was built in 1964. I'll say that in the world of public infrastructure, the mid-1960s were not our finest hour in this country. So it was built in a particular way, I would say an unusual way. It was a gift to the people of New Brunswick by the Beaverbrooks. So it's kind of New Brunswick's first performing arts facility. And it has served this community very well, quite frankly, over the last 52 years. But because of the way the building was designed and the decades of deferred maintenance on the building, it's in fact at the end of its useful life. And so we several years ago, almost a decade ago actually, began doing studies on. Well, it started actually with, we brought in some engineers and consultants and said, where should we put our capital budget? Like, should we replace the roof first or the HVAC system? We wanted to do a 5-year capital plan. And they came back to us after the engineers had been through the building and told us something that we weren't expecting, which was, don't bother. It's not a fixer-upper. And so it took some time. I mean, it actually took 3 years before infrastructure renewal actually showed up in our own business plan. But around about 2010, we started really seriously taking a look at what we should do, including looking at every option you can imagine. And what we have decided is that the best thing and the wisest and most feasible thing for us to do for this community and for future generations is in fact to replace the Playhouse with a new performing arts center. And so that's a project that we're working on right now.
That's a huge step. And people are used to incremental change, not we have to stop here and pick up there.
Yeah, and I'll say that on the public communications front, it has really not been easy, because if you walk by the building and take a cursory glance of it from the outside, or even come to a show, the building kind of looks okay. Yeah. It doesn't, it's not falling down from the outside. The problems in the building are, like I said, design issues. We have mechanical rooms in basements, out at the street level that we just literally would not even be able to work on without tearing half the building down and putting it back together. So it doesn't come naturally to people when they come to a show or they walk by to go, oh yeah, that's a building that's in trouble. Yeah. The other thing is it's kind of not in our DNA because we're a performing arts organization. We're in the business of suspending reality. So we bring you in, we sit you down in a comfortable seat, then we turn the lights off so that you're sitting in the dark, and then we use literally smoke and mirrors, to take you on a fantastical journey into your own imagination, and then we turn the lights on until you get out. So, we've been hiding our own reality, the building's reality, I think, from even the people who come for years. And so it's only been, I think, fairly recently that we've been able to really get the message out about the kind of state that the building's in, and also why it really is not feasible to go back and refurbish that building for another 50 years. And there's all kinds of reasons why we shouldn't do that.
That makes for a great segue for the clip that you brought with you on the building and its insides, and the rationale for how those engineers found what they found and where you need to go from here. So we're going to show you a great clip on the insides of the Playhouse and what's coming in the future.
The Fredericton Playhouse, a building most of us feel attached to because of the memories and because of its place in our Fredericton landscape. You've heard that it's nearing the end of its life, and you might think, the building looks good, so why can't we just fix the Playhouse? Like the plays on the stage, what you're seeing when you come to the Playhouse is like an illusion, and there are some not so pretty sights behind the scenes. The Playhouse was built in the 1960s in an unusual way. Over the years, design issues have become apparent and are causing problems that aren't easily fixed. For starters, the Playhouse is incredibly energy inefficient. Because the walls are totally uninsulated cinder blocks with a brick veneer, the building uses 2.6 times more energy than the average comparable facility. There is no insulation whatsoever, and the fix isn't simple. The mechanical systems are outdated and inadequate. Heating and cooling the building is becoming increasingly difficult. The electrical system is in poor condition, with some components being more than 50 years old. These systems need a complete replacement. Given the nature of the building, it's easier said than done. The steam and water pipes are deteriorating. Some pipes are in confined underground tunnels, making it difficult, expensive, and unsafe to service them. There's significant damage to some parts of the building's structure, and the foundation is shifting, with the addition built in 1972 pulling away from the rest of the building. Fire and safety accessibility need to be brought up to current building code standards. That means barrier-free access needs to be increased. Sprinklers need to be added. Asbestos needs to be removed. And, perhaps the most difficult and expensive of all, exits with fire separation need to be created in all areas of the auditorium. So why not just fix it? The Playhouse would have to close for 18 to 36 months. That means losing at least 2 full performance seasons. Refurbishment costs are hidden, along with much of the infrastructure. With pipes buried beneath concrete, it's hard to know what's down there. The financial risks are substantial. Even if we did all the needed refurbishment work, the Playhouse would lose 35% of its seats, shrinking from 709 to 463. The balcony would be gone. We'd lose much of the backstage area. And we would have to eliminate a third of the lobby space. It's just not feasible to refurbish the Playhouse. Our community risks spending unknown millions of dollars. We won't get to keep the Playhouse as it is today. It won't even look the same. And we'll likely lose the use of it for years. But there's another way to address the problem. The community is working towards a better solution. To learn more, visit theplayhouse.ca/PAC.
So we're back after that video clip about the Playhouse, and while it looks pretty on the outside, there's some stuff on the inside that it's just done and needs to be let go, which allows you to now till the new soil almost on the conversation that this community has to have. And in some ways, it might even parallel how New Brunswick needs to have some conversations about things it needs to let go in order to move forward with the new things that take its place for the next 50 years.
Yeah, and I think the big shift in the conversation is we need, in our particular case, and I think the parallel is the same, is that we have to not talk about building a new Playhouse. We're not talking about replacing the Playhouse with another version of what we have now. What we have now was built in 1964 for what some people at that time felt that we needed at that time. Well, guess what? Things are different.
Yeah, a little.
Like, things are really different today. And so why would we build a new version of what we needed in 1964? So the shift is we have to go from, oh, we have to replace the Playhouse because it's broken and it's not serving us well. It's not an instrument. I like to think of the building as an instrument, like as if our organization were an artist, like a violinist, and that building is like our violin. You know, if we replace the violin with a new one, it doesn't make us any less an artist. It actually allows us to actually do something better because we have something that's not broken. So we have to move from that idea of just replacing it to, okay, now a door is open, and we need to invest some resources in a new performing arts infrastructure. And what could that look like? What could happen there? How could it be configured? What are the components that would be there that would actually serve us, not just today, but serve generations into the future? And that's really what's exciting to me about it.
That's going to be an interesting conversation. There'll be some people who will talk about the Cadillac version, and market will dictate how much, you know. So if you got 700 seats, or if you go to 1,000 seats, do you go to 1,500 seats and then you can book different acts? It invites all that conversation.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, we've gone through a long process to figure the basics of the new Performing Arts Center out. So, and we talked to hundreds and hundreds of people at community meetings. We had stakeholder meetings. We had experts come in and interviews and all kinds of study of statistics and what's going on and what the trends are for the future in the sector. And the big change is that we're going to go from having a theater to a performing arts center. And the big difference is that we're going from what we like to say is Friday night lights to the community living room. So Friday night lights is the idea that Friday night at 7 o'clock, you turn the marquee lights on, fancy people in fancy clothes come to a fancy performance, and then afterwards they leave and that's it. To more of a community center, really, a performing arts center where things are happening all the time, and the lobbies are big enough and configured in such a way that stuff can be happening in the mornings and in the afternoons and after shows, and you know, there's always activity going on and people are learning and interacting and all the things that we talked about earlier about creating interesting space where interesting things can happen. And then also in terms of the size of the theater, what we're talking about is a building that has two formal spaces. One that has 850 seats, so just slightly larger than the existing Playhouse. And one, and that would be like a multi-purpose space that can be used for music, theater, dance, opera, what have you. And then the second space, which is much more flexible, but really has a capacity of around 300. And that's the piece, quite frankly, we heard over and over and over again, that we really have this need for a smaller downtown space that is, again, less fancy, but more flexible, and ability to really contribute to the local art scene in a much more meaningful way. The context is a lot more aligned with where the community is going and the way that art is being made today.
Yeah, and from a facilities management standpoint, you'll be busy like 80 to 90% of the time.
We'll be busy.
110?
Yeah. And both of those venues would be operating simultaneously.
Yes.
So you may be going to see the symphony give a concert in the big hall, and I may be going to see a bunch of students from University of New Brunswick doing a student production in the 300-seat hall. Yeah. And you and I bump into one another in the lobby, at the bar or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, oh, Dennis, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And we're able to have an interaction. So in a way, it really explodes the idea of it being a community space where people are gathering and exchanging ideas and developing their relationships with their communities.
Yeah. And it's fun.
Yeah.
It's just people getting together, have fun. So the business side of that, money involved. So if it's acknowledged by the powers that be that the Playhouse has done, it's run its course, and many thanks and gratitude for everything that it brought to the community, and the new version that gets into the visioning element to it. Will the money, I want to say obviously, will the money part be there for it?
It has to be. I mean,
will people get it, that this is important, and then it gets divided 3 ways or 4 ways, federal, provincial, municipal, community.
I think people need to recognize that this is an important piece of infrastructure that you have to have in a community. Just like you have to have streets, you have to have roads, parks, hospitals, health centers, you have to have schools, and you have to have cultural, you have to have cultural infrastructure. And so I think people, are recognizing that. And I think they're recognizing it more and more every day, that this is a kind of necessary piece of community infrastructure, just like every community needs a hockey rink and they need a, So what is the right size, the right configuration? What is the right spend on that kind of infrastructure for our region in Fredericton, right? So we don't need the Four Seasons Opera House that they have in Toronto, because we're not in Toronto.
Yeah, we're not.
So we need what we need for Fredericton. So it needs to be right sized. It needs to be finished to the right level, like not over the top, but like a quality that has some aspects, I think, of aspiration in it, because that's part of what culture is that idea of being a better society and being a better community. So the idea of aspiration has to be built in. So all of those things kind of come into play when you're deciding on scope and scale. What we have figured out is like those architectural program components, 850 seats, 300 seats, lobbies and public spaces where you can do other interesting things. That translates into a certain number of square feet. Yeah. We know roughly what a building like a performing arts center costs per square foot to build at certain levels of quality. So we know an order of magnitude of what we're talking about, and it's certainly not unrealistic that the various funding partners from levels of government and from the private sector through a private campaign will be able to all come together to pay for it.
And the theme that seems to be emerging from all the lovely conversations on this program, which is fascinating to sit here and have the pleasure of listening to so many different people and their perspectives. It sounds like there's an emerging need for greater cooperation rather than competition amongst people that look like they're competing for the same dollar. Infrastructure dollar, hockey rink dollar versus a theater dollar. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like the narrative is finally pushing to what does our town look like? How does it walk and talk and move, and what does it need? Rather than here's my cause and this is where I want to go, and here's my cause and this is where I want to go. The timing is going to be good, is what I'm thinking, for the vision for whatever the Playhouse emerges as in the future, for people working together for the common infrastructure and in the common culture of the town.
Yeah, and I think what helps is when you look, and it doesn't matter what the piece of infrastructure is, but when you look at what does that project or that piece of infrastructure, what does it really contribute? Mm-hmm. And it's easy to say, well, performing arts, like entertainment, that's a frill, we don't need it. Mm-hmm. It's a frill. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not a frill when you consider the impact that it has. And we talked earlier about impact on economy, but there's also all these other impacts. What is the impact on health?
Yeah.
Like, what is the impact of having a performing arts center on the health of a community? And I'm talking like people's physical
Yes.
and mental well-being. It has a huge impact, especially when you're an organization like ours who's doing all kinds of outreach with children and with youth and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
What is its impact on justice? What is its impact on economy, as I said? So that you really have to look at it in a much more holistic way. The same way I think even the recent announcement about a new downtown health center, a permanent location for a downtown health center in Fredericton. The narrative is different. People are not just talking about the health center being there only to serve the individual clients who are going to walk into that building. They're talking about how that will impact the community, the region as a whole, the neighborhood that it's located in, the people who are going to be working there. It's more complex than just the direct service delivery that a piece of infrastructure delivers. Yep. It's much more complex. And so the more that we can recognize, we can't all have the capacity to understand the complexity, all the intricacies and complexities of it all. But if we can all at least recognize that these things are complex and what it does to and for a community is it goes beyond that direct service delivery, then I think the easier it is for us to look at these projects and compare them to one another, but also understand how they integrate with one another.
Yeah, it's a society or community is very much a three-dimensional spider web. If you can picture the image, or three-dimensional chess like they used to do on Star Trek.
Right.
Yeah, but it's got feelings though. It has emotions, and that'll be the connective tissue. Will be the emotions and the passion for the place.
Right, because it's too easy to say, well, how can you build a performing arts center when there are people who don't have enough to eat?
Yeah.
And what I say is, but you know what happens in the performing arts center is that artists actually talk about the people who don't have enough to eat. Like, it's actually a conversation,
Yes,
so
it's an awakening.
So there's the role of the arts actually is connected to social justice, to poverty reduction, to health, to justice, because those are the things that we actually talk about, in the presentation of the art. So we are able to move society along and help them have a deeper understanding, help them feel it, help them understand, situate themselves in the world in such a way that they care about it differently, they look at it differently, they talk about it with their family or with their community differently. So that the role of the arts goes far beyond the 2 hours that you spend sitting in the dark looking at a stage.
Yep. And to support that even more on more the shadow side, if ever there's devastation or war, the pieces that will be spoken of first will be the cultural or the artistic pieces. Not long ago in the media was an archway that was destroyed in Syria, and they've created a 3D
That's right,
imaging to do it, and outside of the fact that it's 3D technical, getting even the sandblasted parts correct. Just that notion of a human being needs to feel connected to something and needs to feel like it belongs, and that'll come through the arts and culture. So even with all of the tragedy and dark circumstance in and around Syria, here's a news piece about the thing that was of value was an artistic piece.
That's right.
And it's a fascinating thing, and you're at the front end of that conversation. That people need to catch that. Don't wait until everything's all torn down before you start to recognize what you just lost. You're at the front end of creating something for this community that if the community can get into that conversation, they can have a lot of fun with what this becomes.
Absolutely.
And that sets it off in its new 50 years. So do you have a sense of, assuming you hang in there, because you've been there for a while, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, like, do you have that intention already in mind? Man, if we can get through this hurdle here and this hurdle there, that's going to look like that 10 years from now. Do you have a vision that way?
Well, I think so much of it right now is hinging on the physical infrastructure side of things. So right now we're talking about starting construction of a new performing arts center in 2018 and being able to open it in 2020. So that's sort of the next 4 years
that's enough.
of my life right there. But once we get beyond that, I think it's about what's exciting to me is having the community have a new way of interacting with the kinds of things that we do now. I mean, right now we're just, as an organization, we want to do so many things that we can't because we don't have the right infrastructure, or our infrastructure is failing us in terms of what we're able to do. And so having that new instrument to play is really, I think, going to give us wings, to do a lot of great things. And that's just our organization. Remember, the 75% of what we do is for other organizations.
Yeah.
So whether that's Theatre New Brunswick, being able to come in and do something in the new space that they can't currently do, or whether it's the orchestra, or quite frankly, what excites me most are the organizations that don't even exist yet.
Yeah.
Those new things that are coming up, and the new festivals, and the new organizations that are going to organize things and produce work, and the community organizations, and how they're going to be able to take this new instrument and really have it give voice to what they want to be and what they want to do as artists and arts organizations. And so on top of that, if you layer that with the way the community participates and the way the community embraces and connects with the performing arts, I think that's what's exciting to me. If I think 10 years down the road, I can think of like my own kids, for example, living in this community where the relationship with culture is so much richer, even more rich, I should say, than it is now. Because I don't want to come across as sounding like Fredericton's not a culturally rich community. It is. In fact, I think we punch way above our weight, quite frankly, a lot to be proud of. But I think it'll go to another level.
And as you talk about the new instrument, which is a great image, I hope it anchors in all of your heads, is through the YouTube world or the Facebook world, there's a clip that'll recycle every now and then, and it shows a bunch of students in a high school gym sitting in a U shape around the basketball court, and this right whale comes flying up and goes splash and lands because it's 3D imaging going on in the middle of this gym, assuming it's not all photoshopped in and stuff. But I took it as fair.
Right.
So the notion of doing 3D holographic images as part of a performance, and you talk about this new instrument, I'm thinking, oh my goodness.
Well, that whole world is changing so fast. It's like, it's unbelievable. And it's unbelievably exciting, especially for the people who work in that field, I'll say. So the whole technology thing, the impact of technology on what we physically do in live performance is amazing. And we've already done 3D holographic shows using different technologies in our space now. So that whole thing is amazing. What's probably even more interesting, is how people today have access to technology to express themselves and have their own creative pursuits in ways that they weren't able to in the past. So I'll give you an example. My 10-year-old is a filmmaker. I'm serious, she is a bona fide filmmaker. She makes films with an iPod, and it's a creative outlet for her.
Yep.
And a generation ago, I could have never, at 10 years old, been able to make a film. That was something that belonged to professional people who had professional technology, who went to school to do, So suddenly my kids grow up with the idea that they can make things, and they can be connected to their creative self in a different way. Whether that's making, you can record an album on a PC, in your garage or in your bedroom or whatever.
And a guitar becomes a whole band, or that stuff is phenomenal.
So young people are I think young people have an opportunity to connect to their creativity in ways that we've never seen before, and therefore their connection to the arts world in general, including the work that we do, becomes that much more hopeful.
Yep. And there's a root or a theme that runs through all of that stuff, which is the power of storytelling. Whether it's community storytelling, community narrative, your children's narrative, it's wonderful stuff. Well, we've got maybe 35 seconds, 50 seconds left. What do you want to say to wrap up?
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great to sit here and talk about not just the current project and the things we're faced with and the things that we're working on now, why we're working on it in the future, but also to be reminded of the value of these things in our communities around the province, and for the province as a whole. This is not a time for us to retrench. This is the time for us to give, to put air under our wings. And I think creativity is a great fuel for moving forward, a necessary fuel for moving forward. So it's great to work in a field that I think contributes to that in some measure.
Wonderful finish. That's a great thought. As always, thanks for watching. Be good, have fun, and love each other.